Hi guys, Tom here from 6 Foot Networks. Tonight I'm going to talk about two of my favorite commands that I like to use when having to deal with servers and the administration of them. So one of the functions that I do a lot of is I move data either back and forth between servers or between folders and drives on a server. This is great for backing data up or creating a restore point in case you really blow something up and you need to quickly go back to a known good working configuration. The tools that I use are Rsync and SCP. Now I've gotten a few questions in the last few months about Rsync specifically, not so much about SCP, but they kind of go hand in hand. The way you can look at it is Rsync is one of those tools that is, as its name implies, it's a synchronization utility. It allows for a transfer to be interrupted and restarted again without having to redo the whole entire file. Rsync will analyze the file and then update what's missing, or just take options based on, well, I only want to copy or move data that meets this criteria. Well, Rsync will do that. SCP, on the other hand, I use in secure facilities when dealing with SSH because, as the name implies, the S stands for secure, CP is copy, secure copy over SSH. So it's a copy over SSH using the SSH protocol. And what that allows you to do is it allows you in one line to log into a server or a system and copy data from that system to a completely different server. Maybe something in the cloud or another physical location, another data center somewhere, or even another server in the same rack, just a different IP address, different host. Maybe you want to script some copies or rsync, scripts that'll every night run at midnight or whatever. There's a lot of options that you can do, and there have been a lot of questions recently in how I use the rsync tool specifically. But I'm going to wrap SCP into it as well. So as you can see here on my screen, I have an iTerm2 window open. Now, most of you guys know that we are a Mac shop, predominantly Mac. We use Windows in virtual machines, and all of our servers are Linux, some flavor of Linux. We don't use Windows in production. Our operations just don't really have place for Windows. And there's no right or wrong way to set this up, and everybody has their own way of doing things. We have always been a Linux shop, and Mac OS being BSD on steroids, it works for us. So now Mac OS ships with terminal. I use iTerm2 because it's got a few more customization features, iCandy that terminal doesn't have, and it's a little bit friendlier when it comes to just its general usage. Now, you can see here I have a window open. I have another window open down here, and I have these two folders that are created here on the desktop. Along with that, you see two kind of dummy test files that I created in the terminal, or actually in iTerm earlier for this test. They're literally just files that are excessively large with nothing but zeros in them. So it's a pretty good test file. And it allows you to test network connectivity and stuff like that. So Rsync is a tool that's a command line based. So this whole video essentially is going to be in the command line. Now, if you're new to this and you don't know anything about Rsync or SCP or how the command line works, well, you don't really have to beat yourself up too hard, because all of us admins started at that place at one point in time. You know, we weren't born with this superior terminal knowledge, and we all had to kind of figure it out. And through experience, you'll get better and better at it. But the one thing that you can do inside the terminal is, if you know how to spell man, which in this case stands for man pages or manual pages, or just manual if you're, you know, like me and you just truncate names for fun. You could type man and then any command, valid command that's supported in Linux. So in this case, if we do man rsync, just like that, and hit enter, you will get the manual page for rsync. Its usage, everything. And one of the great things about this, depending on who wrote this or what group wrote this, some are better, some are really short, some are books, entire books. The one for rsync is great because they give you examples, they give you, you know, everything else that you could possibly use to, you know, different situations and scenarios that you possibly use this command for. But what I usually look for is this section here, options summary. You can see some dashes, some letters, some double dashes, and what they actually do. Now, options, every command has options. There's got to be some kind of way to implement a command in a custom way. So for example, in this case, the first option here, -v, is verbose. And that literally means that rsync is going to spit out every single detail into this command line window when you hit enter and run it. It's going to tell you everything that it can, or that it's programmed to tell you. And it's actually one of this option is one of the ones I use. Along with that, if you keep going down, there's a ton of them. The other one I use is R for recursive, which I may have missed, but I may have not gotten to it yet because they are in no particular order. But I think in this case I missed it. Let's see. Let's go back up here. There it is. See, R. Since when does R come before D or L or K? That's always been my problem. So recurse, we want directories. We want to go into the folders. So if we're dealing with servers and say you have a directory that's got 1,000 other directories under it and you want all of that data moved to another folder, actually, let me rephrase that. If you want it copied to another folder, because rsync synchronizes folders, it doesn't actually move data. Now there is a delete option here where once it's moved, there you go, here are all the deletes. You have all the delete options where it'll delete the source file after it's copied. It's a little dangerous. I don't use it because if for some reason the copy fails, which is highly unlikely because of how rsync handles files, I've never been bit by it, but it's one of those things where I don't know how I feel about deleting files in bulk if I'm doing a script or a folder move. The idea of deleting possibly hundreds of thousands of files in less than a second, it worries me a little bit. And it should worry you too if you're a serious admin. Now, so we have verbose, we have R for recursive, and then we have the H, -H. Now you notice there's a capital H. We don't want capital H, although preserving hard links might be a good thing to do at some points. Here we go. Lowercase h. Human readable. I want to output the numbers in the progress bar in numbers that I can understand. So for example, rsync throwing me progress in bits doesn't help me when I'm dealing with hundreds of gigs or potentially terabytes of data. or even petabytes of data for all that goes nowadays. So I want human readable, gigs, terabytes, or even megabytes, kilobytes, whatever. It'll actually translate it. Um, I think it does it into 1024 bit blocks. Pretty certain that's it, not 1000. Yeah, and then underneath that H, you see here it says progress. So it'll actually give you a progress indicator as it's going. So now that we have that all said, let's do an example. So rsync space, all the options that I just mentioned, recursive, verbose, human readable, and then we also need the progress one. Okay, so we have command, we have option, and now we're going to do, let's just say we're going to do the 10 gig file. So we're going to denote that with a tilde, because tildes indicate currently logged in users, home folder, and then desktop, because that's where we are at, and I just hit tab for autocomplete. And then we're going to do the 10 gig test file, tab autocomplete, and then we're going to tell it where to go. So there's folder 1, so we're just put it in folder 1. So tilde / desktop folder 1. Now I had to type that out because folder 2 is there too, and it would have not known what to autocomplete it to. Right, enter. Look at that. And once this is done, see, it gives you it in gigs, and then if it was, terabytes, it'll go there. Percentage, speed per second, and then the duration that's essentially left to go. Beautiful, simple, and very, very solid. You can do this on entire folders, depending on how you do your command. You can do wildcards in there with the asterisk. I mean, there's a lot of options here. If you really want to know what rsync can do, go back to this command and start at the top. There's a lot of integration that this will do, and yeah, that's it. So it tells you it sent that many gigabytes. I don't know what received. Oh, received 42 bytes. That's just the overhead that it comes back. And then it did 208 megabytes per second. So that's pretty good, not bad. Now, total size 10.74 gigs, speed up is 1. Never quite understood what that is, but maybe that's something that I should read up on at some point. Anyway, the point is it got there. How do I know that? There it is. I can see it visually. Now, that's essentially it. Now you can build on this. This is like basic framework, and you can go illustrious as you want. You can script this if you want to make a bash script out of this where it'll run every night at midnight. If you have a folder that you must back up and you can't lose the data, or if it's some kind of a flat database file, or even something as your home Excel spreadsheet that tracks your finances, this will do it. It'll move it between flash drives, it'll move it to a hard drive, to a server, whatever you need. Now, that's essentially it for rsync, for this example. What I'm going to go into is SCP, and this is what I use with servers. I do a lot of consulting in secure data centers, cloud service providers, even some government. And you can't go willy-nilly, and even though there's some encryption that you can do with rsync, SCP establishes an SSH tunnel, a secure shell tunnel, before it copies. So the data is encrypted via SSH, and it maintains integrity from A to Z in a full encrypted state. So what we're going to do is, I have this window down here. You can see it says demo at 6foot networks. I have a file server that's called 6foot networks. Who would have thought? I also have a laptop whose login is 6 Foot Networks LLC. But all jokes aside, this is currently looking at a demo folder that I set up on this file server. What you can do is, just like with Rsync, you can do man scp. It'll give you all of it, just like Rsync. You scroll down, there's going to be, there are your options. Actually, we're in them right now, and there's a ton. Suffice it to say, oh, by the way, to get out of man, hit Q. It'll take you back to your, it essentially quits the manual page. So what we're going to do here is literally identical in terms of syntax when it comes to command, options, arguments. It's always like that. If you flip it around, you'll get all sorts of syntax errors. So in this case, you have to specify, because we're dealing with SSH, we have to tell SCP how to log into our server host. Okay, there's going to be a place to provide a username, there's going to be a place to provide the host name, there's going to be a place to provide even the password for that user account that's going to log in to the folder that you're going to log into, essentially, or the volume that you're going to log into. So it's slightly different than rsync-rvh, blah blah blah. But just follow along and you'll probably figure it out. So SCP, okay. We'll do the RV. Now be careful with the RV, or at least the V, with SCP, because you'll get all of the authentication alerts and messages that come back when the connection's established, what ciphers are used, blah blah blah. It might be too much. So for this purpose, we will just do SCP, no options. Okay, because what trails SCP is enough data to actually move the file or copy the file from A to B. Now you can see I created a smaller file here because this is a file server going over my wireless. So I'm going to do a 250 meg test file for this one. So for this, we're going to say SCP, and then we're going to specify the file, which in this case is tilde/desktop. You know what? Pro tip. Here's an administrative pro tip. And I typically use this, but for demos I try to avoid pro tips because sometimes they go a little extreme. If you have the file, say, on your desktop, you can click on it and actually drag it into the window. Let it go. Look what the command prompt did. It actually parsed out the path. So users / 6 Foot Networks, in this case, / is actually the same as just typing tilde, the tilde symbol. So there's our source, and now comes the fun part, because we have to specify a user. So in this case, I have a demo account set up on the server. We're going to do the host name of the server. Oops. Right? Immediately after the host name, to tell SCP that the host name has ended, we must provide a colon. Not a semicolon, not a comma, a colon, 2 dots. And then we're going to specify the path, which you can actually see here in purple. So /volume1/demo. Now, let's go back to this for a little bit. We have the command, no options, local file. We're going to send it to this host with this username at this path. Cool? Now, we're going to hit enter. It's going to ask me for a password. if I can remember the password properly, we're going to put it in right there. And then could not change directory to home directory. Yeah, there's no home directory for the demo account. I did not create one, don't want one. But you can see that it's actually copying. There's your progress. Now, what I want to do is down here, actually I'll do a twofold. So I'm going to do a listing. You can see the file. Just for fun, I'm going to delete that file. So now if I do an ls again, there's nothing there. Guess what? Arrow up, enter. Put the password in. It's going to do it again. Doesn't take that long either. A couple seconds. Well, this is 250 megs. So if you have some documents that are smaller, Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, whatever, you can do the whole folder in seconds over a wireless connection, no less. So if I do ls again, just by hitting the up arrow, it'll print the previous command. Hit enter. You can see there is the test file again. Now, I do know that there are way more advanced ways to use these two commands. This video is in no way a tutorial for any advanced placement of these commands. This is simple how-to stuff. And I know some of you guys are going to say, well, why can't you just drag that file into a folder? You can. You totally can. This is not a replacement of. This is more of a supplemental way of copying your data across the network or across folders. And one of the things that I like about Rsync is that if you have a large file transfer, say it's hundreds of gigs or even terabytes in size, and it blows up on you for whatever reason, power goes out, server shuts down, somebody decides to apply some updates in the middle of your progress, and your connection gets terminated, well, then you have to restart the command. What's great about Rsync is that it will actually pick up where it left off. It'll analyze the files that need to be considered and then copy over what it needs. Now you can overwrite what's there for sanity's sake if you're not worried about the duration of how long it's going to take to copy, but you have those options, and all of them are listed in the manual pages. I really appreciate you guys sticking around with me for this video. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded. I'm sorry about that. The pandemic these days has gotten everything from my household to my professional life kind of upside down, literally, and I'm trying to get back to it. I'll try to do more and more videos as they come. Please reach out to me or leave a comment below. Like and subscribe if this helps you. If you want to see any other content, maybe things that you're interested in, let me know. Drop me a line, either email us, all of that information's in the description, or just reach out to me via the comments, and I read every comment. I typically try to have an engaging conversation with people if they have questions or if they have concerns, comments, or just a different way of doing things. I'm a field engineer. I'm a network engineer by profession, and I learn as much as I can when I can. So if this video helped you, I hope it'll make your life a little bit easier. Again, thank you so much for bearing with me to the end. Have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.